this week, big news happened. It used to be during Corona times, I would date all my recordings and say, this week, here's the thing in the news. So you know when this was recorded. This week, we saw there was an American elections. And I'm don't want to endorse any candidate. I'm not a big fan of Trump. Al tivtachu vin divim. I think that too many people like him too much. Let's not forget he is a Russia and he has terrible mitos. Okay, that was the disclaimer. But also the current regime is viciously anti-Semitic, and I'm happy that they have lost and not won re-election. And I only pray to God that they go away speedily, faster in our days. Uh, if you want to know why they've been anti-Semitic, just understand that they're the ones who've been funding and encouraging the Iranians, the ones who've basically been orchestrating this war against us. And even though, yes, I could blame our government also for the things are run and allowing these threats to fester all these years, still the Iranians are the big bad guys, and the Obama slash Brandon regime has been behind them. Also, they're the ones who basically used their powers to, without any due process whatsoever, strip my neighbors of their possessions, which is terrible when you think about it. It's a very Nazi-like tactic. I'm surprised that there's still Orthodox Jews who would support Harris. You'd have to be insane to do that. I was entertained by something I saw on the eve of the election. This was in the news. Usual people were sending it around. It was in the forward. It was in other places. A letter signed by, quote, 33 Orthodox rabbis. 33 Orthodox rabbis endorsing Harris just because of Trump's mitos. It was supposed to be non-political, just a guy like Trump you can't endorse. And it was funny because people pointed out of these 33 Orthodox rabbis, 9 of them were women. So that's a kind of a contradiction in and of itself. And you look, the initiator was a well-known troublemaker who's most famous for being Matir Asurim and a few others of his ilk. I think that maybe there were 2 men I could identify as actually Orthodox. Perhaps they were tricked into it and they happened to be a little bit left-leaning, but it was mostly a joke. And to the credit of many of the usual suspects, normally when these types of characters are signing on things and making public declarations like we've seen before, so normally when these characters get together and they do their Matir Asurim, of which we've talked about, just flat out checkers, what we've also put online, there's a whole group of them, usual characters, they go together. But to the credit of some of them, they did not join in this ridiculous letter. Even they have their limits, so that's good. Not all of them were there because they knew how particularly foolish this was. There was a man who signed on the letter who famously, his claim to infamy is that he was supporting homosexual marriage legalization in countries of the Western world. He happens not to be American, so he supported it in his country. He was trying to explain from an Orthodox perspective why legally we should at least tolerate such a thing. His argument relied on the freedom of religion one. That is, as Jews, we survive in Western countries, democracies, places where we have guaranteed rights, because one of those rights is the freedom of religion. So just like we enjoy it, we have to make sure to guarantee it. And even though he said, well, technically speaking, the freedom of religion allows for Gentiles to violate some of the Sheva mitzvos. What is it? Gentiles, just like they should be not engaging in homosexuality, they should also not be worshiping strange gods. And the freedom of religion allows that. So we tolerate certain freedoms, some constitutional freedoms, so that we could live as Jews. So we have to, of course, know that there's another side of the coin, which means that others are going to also have this. So too, the idea of marriage is a part of a religious idea. So we have to leave it open. If we would take away people's rights to this type of thing, who knows? It's going to mean that they could limit how we marry, etc. It's really a silly argument. Why is that silly? Because, and this is something that relates to this week's parasha. So let's get into it. Gentiles are supposed to be keeping the Torah also. Really, as Jews, we want the Gentile societies to keep to whatever law God gave them. And the closer they get to doing that, the better. So if it so happens that a society was not free, but it did enforce to letter of the law, the Sheva mitzvos, so we would be happy for that. If you had, let's say, an American society, for 200 years of American constitutional law, it mostly allowed for people to keep the Sheva mitzvos. And unfortunately, it also allowed for Christianity, which was, to a certain extent, avodah zarah. It allows for that. Okay, So we would hope that eventually they would realize that even though they want to have a freedom of religion, the freedom of religion should be limited to those religions which are not idolatrous. Okay, what are we going to do? But if then they decide, for a long time they held certain Gila Rios to be taboo there, and they actually didn't encourage, and they looked down on. They had even ways of enforcing through whatever for whatever means they at their disposal. They had ways to, let's say, greatly discourage adultery and homosexuality. That would be good. If they suddenly turn around now and say we're leaving everything as it is, we're preserving our freedoms, but now we're going to be matir asurim. We're going to turn the other way. Suddenly, adultery and homosexuality are going to become allowed. Maybe we're going to make a big deal about it, about how we are totally tolerant of it. That's not something good. Okay? That's why he was wrong about this. We don't want to encourage things. Hold on. If they didn't let us marry, wouldn't we be obligated to just move country? Yes, that's the other thing. Like the Rambam says, you live in a society that's totally messed up. You have to leave. Okay? Yeah. And Jews forget that, by the way. Jews always forget that in certain places of Gullus. It's not home. And if things are getting too difficult, it's intolerable. Congratulations. You weren't meant to be there anyways. Leave. That's what God's trying to tell you. The problem is the Jews are still sticking around. Like I said, I'm still worried about what's going to happen in America. I still believe that terrible things are going to happen. Now, in reaction to this, I believe that they're not going to allow Trump to take office, by the way, by hook or by crook. They are too obsessed. They've tried to murder him already. We predicted that years ago. And they're going to do whatever it is they accused him of doing, they're going to try doing themselves. So they're going to try doing something to prevent his taking office. I guess in the Senate, perhaps they're not going to certify the results. Whatever they said he wanted to do, they're going to do. They're going to stop. It's going to be pandemonium. And don't forget, there's also sinister elements within the United States now, foreign elements, terrorists, etc. And just like the 9/11 terrorists were able to basically do as they pleased in America before they did as they ultimately pleased, so too right now there are large groups just preparing for the big one, and you have to watch out for that. So get out of America while you still can.